Death Mage Chapter 121, The Meaty Visitor in the Dead of the Night. As the thing gained consciousness, it fell into a state of panic. It didn't know its own state, where it was, or even what it was. Its thoughts were a jumbled mess of different pronouns. In this chaotic state, it tried to move, but its body wouldn't move the way it wanted it to. What is this? What is this? What happened? Why? With this chaos turning into total confusion, the thing desperately tried to move its body around. One of its movements managed to touch something silver. When the thing touched this object, it felt strangely calm, content, and happy. That's right, I don't care. Within that happiness, the thing abandoned the thought of analyzing itself. It also abandoned the thought of unification and separation. The thing realized that its current state was normal for it. More importantly, the thing wanted to move quickly. Because this was the place that the thing had dreamed of. It was the place that it had dreamed of and desired more than any paradise. Quickly, I must be at his side. Driven by this maddening desire, the thing that had been named Lump of Flesh Chan floated into the air, and in the next instant, it vanished.
Vandalyu, wake up. It's still night, but there's a visitor.
Vandalyu awoke to the voice of his mother, Darcia, whose spirit resided in a small bone fragment.
A visitor?
Vandalyu could hardly be described as an ordinary boy, but even so, physically speaking, he was a 9-year-old child. Due to this fact, he slept long hours during times of peace. Everyone knows this, so there shouldn't be anyone visiting me in the dead of the night, unless it's an emergency, Vandalyu thought in confusion as he looked around. And then he saw the visitor that Darcia had mentioned and froze. That thing had the most bizarre appearance that Vandalyu had ever seen in any of his lives. The thing was floating in the middle of the air, and it had an overall spherical shape. But it was made of countless human limbs, torsos and heads twisted around each other to form something resembling a sphere. It had an entirely abnormal appearance. It was more flesh-colored than pink, and it didn't appear to have skin, hair, or even eyes. Overall, there were more female-looking parts, but there were also some male-looking ones, and there were even animal-looking parts in a few places. If it were to be given a description, something like a sphere, 3 meters in diameter, created by a mad artist by twisting and combining flesh-colored mannequins made of clay, might have fit. If this royal castle hadn't been built for the Titan race, whose males could reach heights of up to 3 meters, it would likely have become stuck against the ceiling.
Nice to meet you.
Vandalyu said, addressing the thing's numerous eyeless faces that consisted of only outlines.
Excuse me, but who would you be?
He had been surprised at first, but he had quickly become accustomed to the thing. He often grew numerous heads and limbs himself, and this thing even resembled the zombie giants that had been created by combining multiple corpses. Vandalyu thought that compared to Maribevale, who consisted of bundles of tentacles forming the shape of a Scylla, the thing's appearance wasn't all too surprising.
Oh, wait.
The thing, still floating in the air, froze for a moment and then tear-like mouths appeared on its faces, skillfully producing expressions of grief. And then it expressed its emotions by clutching its heads with its numerous arms, flailing its legs, and twisting its torsos. It had apparently been hurt by Vandalyu's words.
Vandalyu, I'm not sure if I should call it a child or children, but they seem to love you.
Said Darcia.
Just now it said we finally met him.
Did it say that?
It just said ooh, but that's what it felt like.
I see.
Vandalyu believed Darcia's unreliable translation that was based on nothing more than what she felt. It was his mother's words, after all. And he had suspected what the origins of the thing might be, so he thought that it wouldn't be strange for Darcia to be able to understand its feelings.
Its body looks like Lump of Flesh Chan, but what's inside?
Vandalyu wondered.
Did it grow something? I don't know. It does look like a soul has firmly attached itself, though.
Lump of Flesh Chan, the failed product that Vandalyu had created while trying to use Vetus Relic, the resurrection device, to create a body for Darcia. Something had inhabited it, and now it was the thing before Vandalius' eyes. Considering that, perhaps this thing could be considered to be something like Darcia's identical twin. However, the question was, what had inhabited it?
Who else?
The soul residing in the thing that was trembling sorrowfully. Because Lump of Flesh Chan had been a life form without a soul to begin with, it was difficult to imagine that one had been spontaneously created inside it. With that being the case, Vandaliu considered the possibility of the spirits floating about nearby entering it on their own, but that didn't seem to be the case either. The number of spirits around hadn't decreased, and if that was possible, it should have happened much sooner. Lump of Flesh Chan had been around for over a year. So then what is it? Vandaliu wondered.
Bad boy.
Darcia said, interrupting his thoughts.
You can't just make a girl cry and then leave her alone.
Vandaliu was being scolded for leaving Lump of Flesh Chan alone to its sad feelings. Vandaliu did feel some doubt as to whether Lump of Flesh Chan could be classified as a girl. However, it was a fact that he had hurt someone who had a liking for him and then left them alone. I suppose I can analyze it later. Vandaliu stepped down from his bed and called out to the thing.
I'm sorry for saying something so callous. I didn't intend to make you sad. Would you like to be my friend?
Vandaliu apologized earnestly and offered out his hand. The thing froze in the air for a moment. In the next moment, several arms extended outwards, ignoring Vandaliu's hand and wrapping around him to embrace him. From an outside perspective, it might have appeared that it intended to prey on him.
UWAHH.
It groaned,
I'm glad you made up.
said Darcia. The thing clearly had no hostile intentions. Even Vandaliu, who was being embraced, didn't have any discomfort. Overall, it's soft and squishy, and some places feel muscular, and its body temperature is a little low. Rodcourt stared at his minorly injured arm in disbelief. His hand was supposed to be holding the soul of the Gazer Minima Hitomi, as well as those of the 8th Guidance, which he had intended to use as hostages against Vandaliu. But his acquisition of these souls had been obstructed by the god of origin, as well as the gods of Lambda, Zuruwarn, the god of space and creation, and Ricklint, the genie of time and magic. The injuries that Rodcourt had received from Zuruwarn were minor. They were so small that they would heal quickly before long. However, Rodcourt had never been attacked by another god before until now. Since he ruled over reincarnation, far away from every world, he had never become involved with any humans, gods, or beings that were hostile towards gods. Because of this, Rodcourt had no resistance at all when it came to pain. That was why he had faltered and allowed the souls of the Gazer and the others to get away. But the cause of Rodcourt's current discomposure was not the shock of his failure.
Why are Zuruwarn, Ricklint, and the god of origin interfering with me? No, why are they acting as Vandalius' allies?
Zuruwarn and Ricklint might have reacted with, "You really don't know why," if they heard Rodcourt, but Rodcourt was truly surprised. In his mind, since ages long past, he had always just been acting within his own domain, prioritizing his work. The exception was when he had sent reincarnated individuals from another world to the world of origin, and Vandaliu himself had been one of those individuals. Rodcourt thought that Zuruwarn would have no reason to become Vandalius' ally.
But then, what is the meaning behind Zuruwarn and Ricklint interfering with me? It is also likely that Zuruwarn was the one who had made the god of origin act as well. The god of origin, like the god of Ith, is a collective god that is branched out into countless divine beings. There is no way that it would move with a single purpose unless the existence of its world hung in the balance.
In the past, it had been Zuruwarn who had negotiated with the god of the foreign world of Ith. He summoned the champions from that world. There was no mistaking it. TLN, reminder that italicized Ith is the world that the champions, Bellwood, Zackert, etc., came from, not the Ith where everyone was reincarnated from. But even with this experience, it couldn't have been simple for Zuruwarn to conduct negotiations when he still hadn't recovered from the damage he had suffered during the battle against the Demon King. With that being the case, That meant that Zuruwarn had been acting for a considerable amount of time in advance. It meant that he had been negotiating for years at least.
Just when did Zuruwarn and the other gods of Lambda become aware of Vandalu's existence? No, more importantly, why are they interfering, showing hostility towards me?
Rodcourt had thought that all of the gods of Lambda were slumbering other than Alda, the god of law and fate. It had been unexpected for these gods to be active, even if it was only 2 of them, and them showing hostility towards him had been even more unexpected. After all, showing hostility towards Rodcourt would surely yield no benefits for them. Unlike the Demon King, he had no thoughts of invading Lambda and didn't desire its destruction. In fact, he wanted the world to develop. In that regard, Rodcourt could even be considered an ally to the gods of Lambda, in the broadest sense of the word. In fact, he had sent reincarnated individuals there for the purpose of stimulating the world's development. The only thing that could be achieved by defeating Rodcourt was a suspension of the function of the Circle of Transmigration system, which governed the transportation of the souls of Lambda's people. If that happened, Lambda would be overrun by monsters, or become a world where only the races created by Vita would live. Could that be what the gods of Lambda were after?
I see. Zuruwarn and the others have chosen the Circle of Transmigration system created by Vita over mine. That is why they are allying themselves with Vandalu, who is guiding the souls of even humans, elves, and dwarves to Vita's system.
Rodcourt hadn't expected any of the prominent gods who had sided with Vita to ally themselves with Vandalu, except for perhaps Xantark, who had lost his sanity after fusing with an evil god. He felt surprised by his own conclusion, but at the same time he was convinced. This was certainly plausible. And then he felt a strong sense of danger. If the world of Lambda as a whole chose Vita's Circle of Transmigration system, and his own system lost the foundation upon which it was based, Rodcourt would lose one of the sources of his power. That wasn't where the problem stopped. If Vita was revived and she perfected her Circle of Transmigration system, it was possible that Zuruwarn would tell the god of origin how to recreate Circle of Transmigration systems. Rodcourt didn't know if this was how Zuruwarn had negotiated with the god of origin, but considering the effort that it had put into its actions, it was certain that the god of origin had its misgivings towards Rodcourt. If those misgivings were large enough, it would likely change its world's Circle of Transmigration system. Such movements might spread beyond the worlds of Lambda and Origin. For Rodcourt, who had no believers and was not known to any people in any world, his Circle of Transmigration systems controlling fewer worlds was a matter of life and death. If more and more worlds chose Vita's Circle of Reincarnation system, he wouldn't even be able to turn into a specter, fairy, or demon like other fallen gods. He would simply vanish like mist. 1 or 2 worlds less wouldn't cause any problems. He would simply need to find newly born worlds and obtain the authority to govern the circles of transmigration for those worlds. However, worlds were not born with great frequency, and there was no guarantee that he would be able to obtain authority over their circles of transmigration.
Before that happens, I must kill Vandalu at all costs.
Rodcourt concluded.
No, why is that the only conclusion you can come to? Our boss's way of thinking is too rigid.
Said a voice from below. Rodcourt looked down to see the calculation Machida Iran and the inspector Shimada Izumi, who had become his familiar spirits, and the Noah Mouse Smith nearby as well.
If it were me, I would apologize and ask him to not spread Vita's circle of transmigration systems to the other worlds, then completely give up on Origin and Lambda.
Said Izumi.
If you can't cut your losses, things will progress to a point of no return. I agree with these two.
Said Mao. There was the other dozen or so reincarnated individuals who had recently died as well. They had already been informed that there was a third life waiting for them through the instant information transmission method.
You, since you are my familiar spirits, my ruin will be your own ruin as well.
Rodcourt said, wishing that his servants would at least share some of the sense of danger that he felt. Izumi and Iran simply stared back at him through half-closed eyes. Having no other choice, Rodcourt looked around at the other reincarnated individuals, including Mao.
Quite a lot of you have died all at once.
He remarked. This caused the reincarnated individuals to either react with frowns like Tendo and Koya, or avert their eyes awkwardly like Murakami's group. They hadn't died because they'd wanted to, but it seemed that they didn't want to protest and point this out to Rodcourt, the one who had granted them power and a new life.
And it seems you are surprisingly deeply hostile towards each other, even though your lives were but a tutorial before the real thing.
Rodcourt murmured. It seemed that these words couldn't be ignored by the reincarnated individuals.
You should have told us that first.
Shouted the Kronos Murakami Junpei.
That's right, if we knew that something was coming afterwards, we wouldn't have done such reckless things.
Protested the Venus Tsuchiya Kanako. Several others looked at those two with suspicious eyes, as if doubting their words, but they didn't appear to be fazed by this. It seemed that they were mentally tough individuals.
I agree.
Said the mage masher, Minami Asagi, who had been arguing with Murakami Junpei until just moments ago. Since they had no physical bodies, punching each other caused no effect other than a vague sense of pain, so it seemed that he had been unable to put up with Murakami. Despite the fact that he had been advocating for his companions to reunite as one-up until Murakami and his group died.
Life and death are important things for humans. And we aren't optimistic enough to think that we could be reincarnated a second time just because it happened once. It was correct for us to think that we had only one life left and desperately do our best to live it, even if what these guys were aiming for was completely wrong.
Asagi added, glancing in Murakami and Kanako's direction.
Living with the purpose of gaining experience to prepare for the next world. I can't say that there are none who live with that purpose. But we're not like that. We were desperate to achieve the dreams and goals we had for our second lives. With that being the case, it was only natural that our opinions would oppose each other, and we would go our separate ways from time to time. This is only something I realized now, that our second lives are over, though.
In other words, it seemed that Koya wanted to say that the reincarnated individuals had been desperate to make the most of their second chance, because they had never been told that their time and origin was a tutorial. Hearing these words, Rodcourt realized that it might have been a mistake to keep quiet about the fact that they had a third life ahead of them. The truth was that people being reincarnated, with the memories and personalities of their previous lives intact, was not common at all. At the very least, this was the only time that Rodcourt had carried it out. There were probably cases in which individuals were reincarnated with the memories and personalities of their previous lives due to errors and bugs in some circle of transmigration systems, but this was impossible in Rodcourt systems, which he maintained scrupulously. Vandalu was causing great damage to Lambda's system, but such reincarnations had not occurred as of yet. With that being the case, these individuals could not be blamed for living their second lives in a desperate fashion. Still, you all came from the same background, and many of you were acquaintances who studied at the same school, Rodcourt thought, but even he would not say this out loud. He was a god who governed circles of transmigration. He knew that humans were creatures that formed firm bonds with each other astonishingly quickly, but they were also creatures that would betray and kill each other for astonishingly stupid reasons. And one of the reasons he had gone out of his way to reincarnate 101 people at once was so that there would be no problems if 10 or 20% of them were to be killed at each other's hands, or if some, like Kaido Kanata, became absorbed in their own power and disposed of other reincarnated individuals and other people living in their world. However, it was far past the time to tell the reincarnated individuals that they had a third chance.
Well then, do you think it would be better if I were to tell the rest of them now that they have a third life?
Rodcourt asked, already knowing the answer.
No, it's too late. I think things would become even worse if you were to tell them.
He said,
What are you talking about, you shitty teacher? Everything turned out like this because nobody knew that we have a third life ahead of us.
Said Asagi.
I don't mind being called shitty, but stop it with the teacher, you muscle brain Asagi.
Murakami retorted.
What you say is true. If we'd known that we had a third life ahead, we wouldn't have betrayed you and made you our enemies for our third lives. But that only applies if we'd known from the beginning.
How be clearer?
Sensei is saying that it's too late.
Said the marionette Inui Hajime, still hugging his knees.
It's true that if the Bravers were to be told now that there is a third life, they would try to live with more dignity and justice. There wouldn't be any more like me and Kanata. If they knew that they would be reincarnated one more time, and that they would be questioned after their deaths by Inspector Sama here who's become an angel, they wouldn't be able to do any bad things unless they'd totally given up on themselves.
If they did anything bad in life, rather than being sent to hell by a god, they would be killed by the waiting, reincarnated individuals the moment they were reborn. No, perhaps they would be reincarnated as livestock or workhorses, with the memories and personalities of their previous lives intact. Being reincarnated as livestock with a human's mind would be a more fearsome punishment than being sent to hell. In fact, a certain reincarnated individual's parent on Earth had apparently been reincarnated as a tortoise, so such a punishment was certainly possible.
But if we told Rikudo Hijiri and those cooperating with him, do you think they'd stop now?
Hajime continued.
He pulled the strings from the shadows, brainwashed the metamorph, disposed of me, Sensei and the others, as well as the death attribute researchers along with the entire Department of Defense of the Federal Nation. And he is continuing to betray Amemiya and the other Bravers.
That's, it seems, impossible for him to change.
Said Asagi. All of the people that Hijiri had supposedly disposed of knew everything that he had done. Even if he knew this, Rikudo Hijiri was unlikely to change his behavior. And people in Origin's political and business circles were among Hijiri's cooperators. Explaining reincarnation and such to them would not be an option. In fact, it was highly likely that Hijiri's actions would become even more radical if he learned that he had a third life awaiting him.
That's how it is. Therefore, we cannot tell the remaining individuals in Origin about their reincarnation to Lambda.
Said Rodcourt.
Of course, the immortality that Rikudo Hijiri has made his goal is very inconvenient for me. I will take action against him eventually, so I wish for you to turn your attention towards your reincarnation in Lambda.
All right, Kami-sama. So what kind of punishment is waiting for us?
Murakami asked, sounding like he had already resigned to a punishment.
Punishment? What are you talking about?
Said Rodcourt. He didn't understand why Murakami was asking such a thing.
As we thought.
Izumi and Iran whispered to themselves. Both Murakami and Asagi, who had been arguing fiercely with him earlier, showed expressions of bewilderment.
I mean, you saw everything, right? The things we did. I'm even the one directly responsible for killing those two, who became your familiar spirits, you know.
Murakami continued. He had played dumb when questioned by Amemiya Hiroto, but since there was no need to hide things from people who knew everything, he confessed his own deeds. The ones he had killed were even present, but he ignored them.
Is there something wrong with that?
Asked Rodcourt.
I mean, something wrong, you say?
Not only did Rodcourt show no signs of criticizing Murakami's crimes, he seemed to be completely uninterested. Murakami's confusion grew thicker. Because he was the master of this divine realm, Rodcourt understood what he was thinking and began his explanation, taking a little care in choosing his words.
I am not responsible for delivering justice in Origin. Therefore, I do not intend to blame you for the crimes you committed in Origin. To begin with, laws are decided by humans to judge other humans. They have nothing to do with a god such as myself. If I were to punish every single human for killing others, what would I do with the great number of murderers that appear every time a war occurs on Ith or in Origin?
Rodcourt was a god who governed the circles of transmigration, only the circles of transmigration. He would normally never reward anyone no matter how good they were, nor would he punish anyone no matter how evil they were. Indifferently, he simply welcomed the souls of the dead, immediately loaded them into his system, and had them reborn.
And if you want to speak of murderers, the others are not so different from you. Minami Asagi in particular has killed many.
Said Rodcourt.
Wait a minute. I don't remember killing anyone but terrorists and dangerous criminals, and it's not like I intended to kill them.
Being called out suddenly, Asagi protested in surprise.
Even terrorists and dangerous criminals are just humans to me.
Said Rodcourt. Asagi's face stiffened as he fell into silence.
Everyone for Rodcourt, this god, both good and evil people are just humans. No matter what motives and background there is for a murder, it's still just a murder. Our killing of terrorists to protect the many, murders committed by deranged serial killers, soldiers killing enemy soldiers to protect their own nations, it's all just murder.
Iran believed that murder could be considered a good deed, depending on the circumstances. At first, Rodcourt's opinion of no lives are more or less important than others, so the act of taking them is simply murder, no matter what motives are behind it. Might sound like Rodcourt believed that each life was important, but the truth was that this was the absolute worst sense of values from a human's perspective. Rodcourt was completely indifferent to humans' good or evil qualities. He felt no value in life itself. It was fine as long as lots of people were born, lived, and died. That was what he thought.
He does think that it would be a problem if someone planned to wipe out all life. But that's all it is.
Said Izumi, adding to Iran's explanation.
It looks like he doesn't intend to blame you for killing us, though personally, I can't forgive you.
I see, that's good.
Murakami sighed, realizing that Rodcourt really had no intention of punishing him. The fact that he showed no signs of concern over Izumi and Iran's cold gazes might have been because he felt no sense of guilt to begin with.
Well then, the problem is what comes after we're reborn. Asagi Kono, if you don't like me, shall we try to kill each other once we're reborn?
Murakami suggested, turning his attention towards his next life.
If you're still up to no good, then yeah.
Said Asagi.
Of course, if I see you in our next lives, I'm going to kill you with Death Scythe right away.
Said Miyagi.
No, that would be problematic.
Said Rodcourt. He had been uninterested in events on Origin, but he stepped in to stop them now.
Unlike in Origin, my objective is to have you reborn in Lambda to stimulate the development of the world. It would be problematic if you were to reduce your own numbers by killing each other. And I have something I would like to request of you.
Is it killing that Vandalyu guy you were talking about earlier? We're not hired assassins.
Said Murakami.
Considering that you don't care about anyone as long as they can't wipe out all life, it makes me shudder to imagine trying to kill someone you consider necessary to dispose of.
Asagi added.
If you tell me who he is, I'll kill him right away with my Death Scythe. So don't interfere with me killing this shitty teacher.
Said Miyagi. The reincarnated individuals didn't seem to be too enthusiastic about this. Izumi and Iran gave a simple explanation.
It's the first among us, reincarnated individuals who died. He was in Murakami's class. He was my and Minami's classmate. It's Amamiya Hiroto, who fell into the sea as he saved Narumi when the ferry sank.
Said Izumi.
In Origin, his name was the Undead. It's the one that Hiroto and the others faced, the one who saved the 8th guidance that you were fighting and gave them powers.
Iran added. The reincarnated individuals froze as they heard this explanation, and their faces stiffened as they comprehended